early 2000s, I met another CSIRO researcher called David Swain. Dave is a livestock researcher and was based up in Rockhampton. And we met at an internal CSIRO event. CSIRO was going through yet more internal reorganizations. And at that point, they were putting all sorts of different CSIRO scientists in the one room just to see what would happen. And anyway, that's where I met Dave. And we got talking, and he does livestock research. So he wanted to know what cows were doing night and day. And the way they did this kind of research was they built a scaffold tower in the corner of a paddock, and people would go up there with binoculars and a notepad, and they would make notes about what the cows were doing, and they'd take shifts. And I'm a roboticist, and an important problem in robotics is knowing where your robot is any time of day. And we use GPS and inertial sensors and all sorts of stuff like that. And I said, well, why don't you just put inertial sensors on the cow, and then it would know where it was. And so that seemed like a good idea. So we started a project, and we built devices to put onto animals that would say where they are and what they're doing. And that actually led to some quite interesting information about what cows do. During the night, they wake up in the middle of the night and eat for a bit and then go back to sleep again. And you can also understand something about the social structure of animals. The calves stay with the mothers, but there's also structure and hierarchy within herds of cattle that you can discern through. Once you know where everybody is all of the time, you also find what percentage of the day they're walking around eating and what percentage of the day they're lying down and ruminating. You can get all this rich behavioural information about cows you've never been able to get before, just by automating the process of data collection. But you can take it a step further, and you can say that you want cows to be in a particular part of the landscape and not in another part of the landscape. This is the notion of a virtual fence, where not only do you know where the animal is, but you apply what we call an aversive stimulus to the animal if it crosses an invisible line. And this is an old concept. Certainly we didn't invent it, but we did a lot of experiments with virtual fencing using a research farm up in Rockhampton. And we showed that it does in fact work, that you can keep animals within an invisible paddock, or a paddock with invisible fences, and then you can even change the fences over time. So you could actually move a paddock full of cows over the landscape to ensure that it's evenly grazed. So that was quite wonderful, because at that point the cattle are becoming something like a robot. We've got software which is controlling where they go and how they behave. So that was a really interesting experience for me. I learned not a whole lot, but I learned quite a lot about animal behaviour, and it was just a really interesting problem space, because fences are enormously expensive to construct. They're not very flexible once they're in. You can't move them very easily. In the north, they get washed away by floods a lot. So if you could reduce fences, it would be a big win to the cattle industry. And if you could actually bring a paddock of cattle into the sale yard, instead of having to go out and muster them, you just command the paddock to move across the landscape and bring the cattle back home. It would also be a huge win. And mustering is a very dangerous activity. And I went up once with a heli mustering pilot. It was mad. So that was a really interesting project. An unfinished business there. Virtual fences are still not a thing, unfortunately.